Good evening, YouTube. You guys are now watching another segment of the Cali Effect. Today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to play Infernoid, the biggest deck in the competition of Yu-Gi-Oh! Now the reason why we say that this deck is the biggest deck is because it summons so many huge monsters that not only can manipulate the opponent's activation cards or even their opponent's graveyard, they also have second effects that give you some huge type of advantage when summoned or when you attack. Also, even their little monsters generate some type of advantage, and it's very easy to summon all of these monsters. Before I actually go into telling you guys what the monsters do and how exactly to play them, I just wanted to mention a couple of fun facts about Infernoids. They did debut in Secrets of Eternity, and also all of their monsters' names are off of numbers in different languages. But without further ado, let's start talking about those Infernoid monsters. I'm going to split up the Infernoid monsters into 4 different classes. The only summonable guy, the little guys, Tier 2, and also the huge Infernoid Ultimate God Supernova Infernoid monsters that wipe everything from the existence of Earth. Let's start off with the little guy, Infernoid Decadron, the only summonable Infernoid by normal summon or special summonable means. He is the level 1 tuner. His effect is very interesting. Another fun fact about Infernoids is that they have a tuner with no synchro. I just thought I should put that out there. When Decadron is normal summoned or special summoned, you can send one Infernoid monster from your deck to the graveyard. Furthermore, Infernoid Decadron gains that monster's effect, and it gains the monsters a level. So if you send any of your Infernoid monsters, keep in mind you have to add +1 to that Infernoid monster's level. It's a very interesting effect because not only does it allow you to send your Infernoid monsters that you need to the graveyard, like your big guys, it also gives you a couple of interesting Synchro and Exceed plays because you can manipulate his level. Next are the Tier 2 Infernoids. And the Tier 2 Infernoids, unlike Decadron and all of the other tiers of Infernoids, have a very special rule that I need you guys to keep in mind. If you control monsters on your field that exceed the level or rank of 8, then you can't summon your Infernoid monsters. Now this only applies to effect monsters, so we can pull some really interesting combos and tricks with that, abusing that we can have non-effect monsters on the side of the field and still being able to special summon Infernoids. The best thing about these guys is that they also contain another special rule. During your opponent's turn, you contribute a monster to banish a card in your opponent's graveyard. Another thing about them is that they can only be special summoned from hand, and not hand or graveyard. That's a little drawback about them, but their effects are totally worth it. We have Pyramus, Antra, Harmodic, and Petrula. All of these Infernoids I would consider the Tier 2 guys because they're levels 1 through 4, and they all fit this category. Pyramus' effect allows you to spin a face-down card on the field to the opponent's deck. Antra's effect allows you to bounce a face-up card to your opponent's hand. Harmodic allows you to destroy one monster on side of the field, and Petrula allows you to destroy one back row. Now those ignition effects can only be activated on your turn, and you can't battle with the monsters, but seeing Antra and Pyramus' attack, you probably wouldn't want to battle with him anyways. Now since we're done with our Tier 2 Infernoid monsters, let's talk about our Tier 3 Infernoid monsters, and they have just a slight adjustment to their effects. The first thing about the Tier 3 Infernoid monsters is that while they can be special summoned from the hand, they can also be special summoned from the graveyard as well. The only difference between the Tier 2 and the Tier 3 Infernoid monsters, and that is opposed to the Tier 2 monsters only costing 1 Infernoid, the Tier 2 monsters cost 2. Another great thing about the Tier 3 Infernoid monsters is that you can banish cards in your opponent's graveyard during either player's turn just by tributing a monster you control. These Tier 2 Infernoid monsters are great, but unfortunately, there's only 2 good Infernoid Tier 3 monsters. Another great thing is that they all involve battle, but you kind of saw it by this. Wow, I'm showing you guys right now. Infernoid Seismus. Now when Seismus battles an opponent's monsters, at the end of the battle phase you can banish a card on your opponent's side of the field. As well as Infernoid Antondo. Okay, look, you guys already know I'm horrible with spelling. Just give me some credit for trying, okay? When Antando attacks an opponent's monster and destroys it by battle, he can attack once again in a row. These guys are your two strong Infernoid monsters. You're going to be summoning these guys more often than not. And the best thing about them is that you can summon two of them to your side of the field to be able to wreck your opponent. While as I did say, you can't control monsters above level 8 or rank 8, Antando's 8, so you can summon another 8. You just can't summon any more after that. The next set is the Tier 4 Infernoid monsters, and these monsters are spectacular. They have the exact same rules as the Tier 3 Infernoid monsters, except they're just a little different. As opposed to banishing just 2 Infernoid monsters, the Tier 4 Infernoid monsters require you to banish 3 Infernoid monsters from your hand or your graveyard. The next thing about them is, as opposed to banishing cards from your graveyard, they have a little more interesting effects. First, we have Infernoid Onuchu, and when Onuchu is special summoned, you get to destroy all monsters on the field. That's a Judgment Dragon right there for monsters. It's pretty good with a 3K beater. The next thing about Onuchu is if your opponent activates a spell or trap, you contribute 1 monster on your side of the field to negate the activation and destroy it. I'm not 100% sure if it's banished, but I know Infernoid Deviati does. What Deviati does is that when it's special summoned, you can destroy all spells and trap cards that are not void spells and trap cards and send them to the graveyard. Furthermore, if a monster effect is activated, you contribute a monster on your side of the field. Deviati negates the monster's effect and banishes. Now these two are gods. They're 2,900 and 3,000 attack respectively. Put them at some of the highest level of monsters to summon. Unfortunately, their effects to negate is only once per turn, but I don't think you're gonna need to be, like negating that much with them on the field. You'll be winning the game rather quick. There's also another Infernoid monster, and I'm gonna have to bring out the card because it has a lot of text. Alright guys, there's the legendary Tier 5, and this does not follow any rule because it's an extra deck card. What it requires is Infernoid Onuchu, Infernoid Deviati, and 1 or more Infernoid monsters. When this card is fusion summoned, you can apply the effects in sequence depending on the number of fusion material monsters with different names used for this card's fusion summon. If you use 3 or more, each player sends 3 cards from their extra deck to the graveyard. If you use 5 or more, each player sends the top 3 cards from their deck to the graveyard. If you send 8 or more, each player returns 3 of their banished cards to the graveyard. If you send 10 or more, each player sends their entire hand to the graveyard. Now 3,400 attack and 3,600 defense is pretty good. And also the fact that it kind of does all those effects if you send 10 or more makes it even better. Now, I'm not 100% a big fan of this, but I just thought I should put him out there because he's not that hard to summon and he's definitely not as hard as he looks to summon. But let's get on to the next part, me discussing the spell and trap support for this deck because it is so much of it. Alright guys, there's a reason why I wanted to go into the spell and trap support before I went into other cards outside of the deck. There is so many. There's enough spell and trap support that you can just make a complete pure Infernoid deck. And I'm not saying that it's the worst route, but it's definitely a very interesting route to go into. There's Void Launch, Void Vanishment, Void Purification, Void Expansion, Void this, Void that, Into the Void, 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 Void. It's so many Void spells and trap cards that you could use, but the only one that I really care about is Void Seer. Now Void Seer is pretty interesting. You can activate it from your hand to protect one of your Infernoid monsters, and then you can activate it in your graveyard to protect another Infernoid monster. Void Seer definitely deserves a spot in every Infernoid deck. Next behind it, I would have to say Void Dream. Now Void Dream makes all of your Infernoid monsters level 1. That just makes your Infernoid strategy really good. The next thing is that it allows you to fusion summon into your Infernoid Tier, and it becomes a Shadow fusion if your opponent controls a monster special summon from the extra deck. Now, since I'm done with all this voidness, there has to be something to fill that hole. So let's talk about the Lightsworn support. The Lightsworn support is very intricate because Lightsworns don't necessarily belong in Infernoids, but it makes the deck a lot faster. Since the deck needs as many Infernoid monsters to the graveyard to be able to special summon themselves, you can find yourself wanting to play the Lightsworn engine. There's Lila, Lumina, and Raiden. Those are the top 3 Lightsworns for the deck, hands down. Now you can get cute and you can run Minerva, Jane, Garroth, and Judgment Dragon if you want to, but I tend to keep it as small as possible, but being able to mill as many cards as possible, getting you your strategy effectively. Alternatively, cards like Charge the Light Brigade and Solar Recharge can become very good in the deck because it does further your strategy to put Infernoid monsters to the graveyard. There's also cards like Monster Gate and Reasoning that allow you to put even more Infernoid monsters to the graveyard, and Reasoning is almost like a win condition for the deck, putting so many monsters into the graveyard mainly because your Infernoid monsters can't be special summoned, so Reasoning just skips over them. It allows you to put so many of your Infernoid monsters to the graveyard, setting up your plays. There are a lot of cards that Infernoids could play to make the deck so much better. You can even run normal monsters. But most importantly, just remember that you want to play Infernoids to the best of the ability that also defeats your local level meta decks. I will see you guys playing the biggest deck of all time, Infernoids. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and most of all, enjoy.